Happy Monday, fight fans. This is the DAZN Boxing Show. I go by the name of Ak.
And I'm Barack, the Boxing Bully.
Nice of you to join us. We had one filled weekend, not only with boxing, but with breaking news. That's right. Danny Garcia, big win over Jose Benavidez. Jake Paul, Hasim Rahman, no longer happening. Let's get into it on the opening bell. Barack, before we get into Danny Garcia versus Benavidez, we have to get into this breaking news that we discovered while we were at the venue at the Danny Garcia fight this past Saturday. Looks like Jake Paul, Hasim Rahman, is not happening.
Broke my heart. Listen, 2 fights in New York back-to-back weekends. Nothing better than that. The long-awaited Jake Paul fighting a real boxer. He actually tried before, couldn't do it with Tommy Fury. Tommy Fury backed out. Now he tried again. There's another problem, and that's just going to leave more internet trolls to keep trolling Jake because he hasn't proved himself. There's 2 sides to a story always. I think if we go back, right? Well, when you say the truth, huh? But if we just go back to the origin, the contract was signed. The contract was signed at 200 pounds, so we would expect Hasim Rahman to be at 200 pounds. But it is what it is. He came on his live and said, hey, you know what? My body just couldn't do it. My body just couldn't do it. We're a week out. Fights don't get canceled a week out. And we agreed to 205 pounds. I could have made it to 205 pounds. I'm 10 pounds away. See, the reason was he started getting text messages and DMs from other fighters and other people from other sports saying, hey, champ, we can help you lose that 10 pounds in a week. That's nothing. So he needed more help, and that's what it was. But at the end of the day, the contract said 200. Do Jake Paul and his team have the right to cancel it? I guess so. It was strange being canceled a week out because you figure you give the fighter time. But when the commission steps in and says, hey, you know what? It's just not healthy for you to lose that much pound. I can understand that. But at the same time, sometimes it seems like a contradiction because we know fighters lose 10 pounds in a day.
Yeah, well, look, Barack, I have a few things to say about that. Now, we actually had a chance to chop it up with Hasim Rahman Jr. yesterday, private press conference with some media that were invited. And I understood his story to some degree. But to your point, the contract was signed at 200. Now, the commission ordered the bout to be moved up to 204, 205, if I'm not mistaken, because of the fact that they're worried about him losing that much weight a week out to the fight. Now, first thing I want to say is, as far as Jake Paul canceling the fight a week out, I understand that there's more to lose should he wait till Friday, the day of, where the event is already planned. People are already in town, right? So the show would have to go on without the main event. So there will be money lost on pay-per-view sales. And all of those fighters before that will still, on the undercard, will still have to be paid. The event will still have to go on. This way, canceling a week out, it would actually clean that mess up because obviously the pay-per-views are going to sell because of Jake Paul versus Hasim Rahman Jr. So that was one of the reasons. If they didn't think that Hasim Rahman would be able to make, because he did put that out there, listen, my body can't take it anymore. So when Jake Paul and his team and the commission send this to his team saying, hey, listen, the fight has to be moved at 205. Him and his team countered saying, no, let's do it at 215, which is what he was weighing at the time, or maybe a pound heavier. So that was his counter. So there was a window there where most valuable promotions thought that Hasim Rahman Jr. could not make 205 because he countered with 215. Now, I don't know the intricate details about this negotiation or back and forth, but I know that he didn't agree right away to 205. So that left room for Jake and his team to say, all right, he can't make 205. The fight is going to be canceled. Let's cut our losses and cancel it now, opposed to waiting on the day before the fight where the event will still have to happen. And to add to that really quick, Barack, we talk about sacrifices all the time. We talk about the sacrifices that Floyd Mayweather did early in his career when it comes to weight. Canelo, guys like Oscar De La Hoya, and so on. So here's an opportunity for Hasim Rahman Jr. Now, I know health is important, but as far as him agreeing to the 205 right away, not countering, was a sacrifice that had to be made. Let's not play around with these dudes. I want this fight to happen. I actually have an extra 5 pounds. I don't have to make 200 now. Now I only have to make 205. It's a week out. Let me just agree, make the sacrifices, and I'll deal with whatever I have to deal with on Friday come weigh-in if I'm over. But I'm not going to give these guys an opportunity to cancel this fight. And that's what happened.
No, a lot of things that you say make sense. You know, what you say about, hey, not waiting until that Friday, the weigh-in to cancel the fight, because then that's money, that's more money lost, because they already lost money in the promotion and stuff like that, and the camps, money that you spend on a camp and everything else. So money is already lost, you know, but yes, that would be more money lost. Getting that close to the fight, I guess you got to pay the fighters. Once the fighters weigh in, that's it. The undercard weigh in, yes. But understand something, that not once did Hasim Rahman get on the phone and say, yeah, Jake, I can only make 215, bro. Hasim Rahman is being represented by his lawyers, by everybody in his camp besides him. He's not doing the talking. So this is just normal negotiation process. I don't like it. I don't like that the fight is called off. I wish, yes, that they could have came back and said, all right, fine, 205. Let's go. Hasim, my client can make 205. Let's do it at 205. I commend Jake on accepting the 205, because that was strange. I thought he would only accept 200 because he fights at 190. He's inexperienced. He got to make Hasim cut down something so he can have some kind of advantage, since he has no experience compared to Hasim. He doesn't have the size and maybe even the strength, who knows, you know, so he needed some kind of advantage, and that made sense.
Which makes sense. I mean,
it makes sense, but strategy. it's gonna be ridiculed by some fans. But yes, that makes sense to me. Now, but accepting 205, I give him credit for that. Yeah. But look, I do understand the process of negotiating. You start at 215, hopefully you get around 208 or something like that. And I think that's what they were considering, like not trying to kill himself. But if he had the right help from the beginning, because he also mentioned in that press conference that Jake's team said they were going to front him some money so that he can have a camp that he needs. At that time, you know, Rahman's not making a whole bunch of money. He can't hire nutritionists and all of that to get this weight off and get a proper 3.5 week, 4 week camp, you know. And he stated in that press conference that he didn't get that help that he needed. And then all of a sudden, after this news came out, a lot of people was flooding his DMs. Hey, we can help you, champ.
Well, I mean, look, I could have helped Hasim. I lost 14 pounds in 5 days.
Yeah, but the way you did it, Hasim would have died trying to train. And
I was jogging every day, but that's a joke. Nevertheless, I understand both sides, but I would have to lean towards Jake's side only because the contract was signed at 200. He had nothing to do with the fight. We moved up to 205, which only benefits Hasim Rahman Jr. And to my understanding, there was a 12-hour window, all right? A 12-hour window from when they gave Hasim Rahman Jr. and his team an ultimatum on accepting the 205. So why did it take that? Hold on. Why did it take that long for him and his team to figure out if he would agree? Meaning they countered with 215. But at that point, during that time, there has to be some communication between him and his team saying, yo, hey, do you think you can make this 205? You know, I don't think Jake is going to accept 215. And answering back to Jake's team saying I can accept the 205, I think they allowed too much time to go past. I'm not saying this is normal practice. Obviously, a fight being canceled out a week out. I mean, it's happened before because of injuries and other reasons. But let's not forget that the fight was signed at 200, and it was 205, which benefits. And there were, listen, there were some, I guess, according to Cohen's team and who we talked to yesterday, there were some stipulations in this new contract that they was going over. But agreeing on the 205 is one thing. As far as the long form and all the other stuff, you guys can deal with that with the legal team. But saying we can make 205 in my opinion, should have been.
Yeah, I don't know.
Said right away.
Come on, bro. That never happens. Do I have to remind you our own personal business where we had money on a contract with somebody and then all of a sudden, because we didn't accept it early enough, they backed out of it. Do you remember that, Ak? We was going to accept that money. I don't know if you remember. Our agent was like, yo, okay. So there you go. You don't just accept the first thing, no matter what. Even if it sounds good and you want it.
Even with this, even with our contract, even with our contract with DAZN, we've accepted things before.
But I'm talking about that one instance. I'm talking about that one instance.
Yes,
because we didn't accept DAZN easy like that neither. So what I'm saying is that you just don't accept the first offer, just like in baseball. You don't swing at that first pitch, brother.
But if you don't sign, if accepting it is one thing, signing it, it's a different thing. That's not the same thing.
It's not about that. It's about. We didn't know. They didn't know. Hasim Rahman's team did not know that Jake Paul and them was going to be like, all right, that's it. Because he had 4 more hours to go in that window of time where they gave him to agree. Now, the very next day, he's like, hey, I can make 205. Now, I do understand Jake can cancel at any time. I'm not faulting anybody for canceling. If the contract was at 200, fine, cancel. But if you agreed to 205 and you gave him that little window, then I can understand. You still got 4 hours left to say, to wait for them to say, hey, okay, I can make 205.
Look,
that's all I'm saying.
I think this is a classic case of trying to negotiate and kind of, losing out. And instead of agreeing to 205, countering with 215 was a mistake. Kind of reminds me of Luis Ortiz trying to negotiate with Matchroom and his team for the AJ fight. They offered him 7, he wanted 10, and he lost out on the fight. Now, I do feel bad for Hasim Rahman Jr. and his team training for this fight. There was a big opportunity, a lot of bad blood there. He didn't get a chance to fight. Hopefully in the near future. We have to move on to our guy, Swift, Danny Garcia, this past weekend at the Barclays Center. Phenomenal performance. I was happy. Hell of a comeback after 18 months. Barack, how proud are you of the Philly guy?
Listen, I'm super proud of Danny Garcia, not just because he went in there and showed us a new wrinkle, showed us, hey, don't you remember in the amateurs, I was a fighter. I was an amateur standout, just like Jose Benavidez, national champion and stuff like that. I think Jose Benavidez beat one of the Gary Russell brothers, Allen, that is. So, yeah, I get it. Like, hey, let me remind you, I can fight. I cannot just sit down there and throw my left hook that everybody would say, oh, it's a closed eye left hook and he's knocking people out. The boy can fight. He showed us that for 12 rounds, did not get tired, didn't really stand there and bang and sit down his punches. So that was surprising, but he showed us that he can fight. First of all, Benavidez, yes, he's not really a 154-pounder, neither is Danny, but Benavidez was obviously the bigger guy, coming in 5'10 and a half, maybe 5'11. He looked bigger than him, longer than him, 71.5-inch reach, so you figure Danny had to move just to get on the inside, but Danny showed that he was faster. He even had faster feet. Danny has been criticized for being flat-foot by Zab Judah and everybody else, and he showed that he's not flat-foot. He showed that he could box. But what impressed me the most, Ak, was afterwards how he was so transparent in the post-fight interview about his struggles with anxiety and depression. And yes, I understand that Errol Spence came online and said, I don't care about that ish, people trying to pay rent and all of that. I just think people who haven't felt anxiety, maybe you could speak from that position, who haven't felt anxiety, doesn't understand the power that it has over people and the struggles that they actually deal with. And sometimes we can be a little insensitive.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I mean, he has. I mean, look, I don't know if Errol has ever suffered or experienced that. I evidently not, or I would think not, if he brushes it off like that, because it's very serious and it affects you physically, mentally. So yes, I commend Danny for putting that out there. Ryan Garcia was the same way a while back, a couple of years ago, putting out that he was suffering from it. So. People don't understand when a fighter of that magnitude does that, it kind of makes a lot of people feel more comfortable with opening up and talking about it and getting help. So that's a good thing. That's inspiring a bunch of people. This is outside of the sport. Now, as far as his fight, look, he used the jab, he stabbed the jab to the body, to the head. He was able to throw, combinations, 3-4 punch combinations at a time and land all of the shots. It reminded me of, back then, Barack, when nobody felt Danny Garcia could beat the hard punching Lucas Matisse, and he outboxed him for 12 rounds and even dropped him in that fight. It gave me flashbacks of that old Danny Garcia that can box, and a lot of people, I guess, didn't know he could box. A lot of people were getting credit for didn't give him credit for being a good boxer, and he brought all of that out. I guess he had a chip on his shoulder, a lot to let out. Great training camp. You pointed out that he didn't get tired. Conditioning was right. Game plan was right. New weight class, you always have to worry about that. Yes, Benavidez was a lot bigger than him, a lot longer. He kept posing and doing this thing like that and nodding his head. That didn't mean anything. He was getting hit nonstop throughout the fight. The one thing I have to point out, Barack, is that one judge scored the fight 114. This is what has to stop.
That was kind of crazy.
It's insane because honestly, I didn't give Benavidez more than 3 rounds. I gave him 2 rounds. I thought it was a clean victory. Danny outboxed him the entire night, and he showed great defense.
Right.
A fighter like that should not be robbed of a unanimous decision. You pointed it out last night when we were Saturday night when we were talking after the fight. This is a majority decision, when in reality it was obviously a unanimous decision. But this gets swept under the rug because Danny gets the win and moves on. He gets that W. And then that doesn't get scrutinized. There's no microscope under that because the guy got the win. It wasn't a robbery, so to speak. No, that needs to be addressed just as the robbery, because that could have went the other way. If another judge had it the same way, a draw, the fight could have ended in a draw. So you have to apply pressure to that judge. And I'm sorry, I don't have his name in front of me, but that needs to be addressed. Even in wins, judges with those type of scorecards need to be addressed, just as the Floyd Mayweather Canelo card.
Man.
Yeah, I don't.
And stuff like
it made
that
me really upset.
It goes on your record for the rest of your life, and that kind of sucks. But I just want to give a little bit of context about Errol Spence. It's not like Errol Spence saw the post-fight interview with Danny Garcia and said, "Oh man, I ain't trying to hear that." What got on Errol Spence's nerve is that Danny had an interview, with K. Abdul on The Good Fight, and he was like saying that he suffered that before the Errol Spence fight. You understand? And maybe he said it on other platforms as well. I don't know. But he was saying that he suffered with anxiety before the Errol Spence fight. It was his worst camp. So what it was to Errol, he's like, you're taking away my... No, what I'm saying is, if you beat somebody, you don't want to hear anybody say anything about an excuse other than I was better than you.
I agree with Errol.
Think about it. Danny never said anything before. Danny was like, because he's a freaking warrior. He said, hey, you know what? His jab, he controlled the fight with his jab, talking about Errol Spence, and that's how he ended it. So now him coming out with the truth that, it was a mental struggle for him. Even his father was like, yo, Danny just couldn't shake it. Right. So it kind of hurts Errol. He's like, yo, man, why you trying to taint my win? But
it doesn't mean that it's not true. And an important fact is that after the Errol Spence fight, Danny did say, yo, he won the fight, no excuses. Now, yes, in hindsight, you bring this up, it might come off like that. I understand.
I'm just trying to give context for Errol. That Errol's not some freaking maniac who says, you're going through this. I don't care. No, he's saying, don't take away my win. That's all.
I totally agree with that. I mean, Errol's not that type of guy, man. He's a solid guy. He's not going to undermine somebody going through something serious, but he's a fighter. Fighters are sensitive about their wins and their victories, so he doesn't want it to come off like an excuse. I think Danny was in a tough spot trying to answer a question, being honest about what he was going through. Sometimes that might come across as an excuse, but he's just being honest and giving some, being transparent of what he was going through at the time. Some people might take it as an excuse. So I understand both sides. Both guys are solid. Danny is moving on at 154, and I'm looking forward to seeing him in the ring again.
100%. Man, listen, I know we went long, but I just got to mention this one thing real quick. In the Gary Russell fight against Rancis Bartholomew, everybody booed the ref because they thought he stopped it early. Rancis was hurt. He got dropped by Gary Russell, but understand something, that the referee is the only man in the ring other than the fighters. He actually exaggerated his movements to show that he was looking into the eyes of Rances. Whatever he saw, nobody else in the world can see, not even the cameras. Whatever he saw in his eyes told him, I'm waving off the fight. So before we just criticize the referee and say, hey, that was a early stoppage, let's speak to the ref and say, what did you see, bro?
Let's allow him to do his job. And great performance by Gary Antoine Russell. All right, that's our show for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Peace and love. Stay safe. We're out of here.